Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me today. In this webinar, we'll be talking about the motivations of cybercriminals when it comes to our web applications. Also, we'll be talking about what techniques do they use and how can we protect our own applications. So the agenda for today, it's 4 big questions. The first one is the motivations of cybercriminals or unethical hackers. The second one is what techniques do they use? The third one is what's the value of stolen data, of compromised applications, how they can make money. And the last one is how can we protect ourselves? So the important reason of the questions is that the motivations of hackers, most of the time people ask me how they do what they do, like what kind of, how they got access into the application or the server. For just a few people ask me how they do it. So what they do, I'm sorry. So if we move to the next slide. So my name is Jaime Manteiga, and I have helped several organizations across the world by solving their cybersecurity challenges. I am also the co-founder and CTO of Vencom, which is a cybersecurity consulting firm located in Miami, Florida. You have my social networks. If any of you have any questions or wants to connect with me, you can use my LinkedIn or Medium or my email. Okay, so the first question, what's the motivations? What's the motivations of unethical hackers or cyber criminals? So as you expected, the first one is financial gain. They want to make money, like everyone else. They put a lot of effort into hacking applications, and they want a return of investment in their time as much as possible. The second is the espionage, and this one is very important as well, because most people only think about the financial, and the only motivation that hackers have is that they want to make money, and that's it. But that's not really entirely true. The second one, espionage, this one covers political and military information. So everything that comes to political, like elections, trying to hack into elections, or trying to hack into military web applications, which contains, like secret, top secret documents. The third one is for fun, and this one it's not that common. It used to be, at the beginning when hacker was like like a trending stuff. People will hack into websites and will change the homepage, and they will put like a meme or a text. This website was hacked by like the group, whatever. So as we can see in the chart at the right, for fun it's really declining a little bit. It comes up in 2017. Also, I remember a few years back in San Francisco, a hacker modified the traffic warning signs, and it changed the text. Instead of putting the regular text, which is don't use your cell phone, or it's raining, or there is traffic ahead. So he changed the sign to the Godzilla attack. It was pretty funny. It was around all the news. But the thing is that it created a lot of traffic in the area for several hours. And he was prosecuted for the federal government. So it's fun, but it's not legal. And the last one is ideology. And this one covers ideas. It could be religion, it could be economic mentality. Some people, they think that they're communists or socialists. The other are, like capitalists, and they change, they try to hack into each other to change the website so they think differently. So this one is the least of all of them, but it's still a possibility. So in this timeline, we can see a few of the biggest data breaches over time, only from 2016 and through 2018. Keep in mind, these are not all the data breaches. These just are examples that I decided to use for this presentation. So the first one is back in 2016, Yahoo got compromised. 3 billion Yahoo accounts were hacked. That's a lot of information. The second one is Uber, which is a transportation company very used here in the US and around the world in most countries. They reported that hackers were able to steal information for over 57 million riders and drivers. So which that contains a lot of potential information like driver license, date of birth, full name, physical address. So it's very critical information. We have then in 2017 Equifax with almost 150 million customers, and this one was very critical as well because it contains social security numbers, the credit score and credit applications of several millions of citizens. The other one is Under Armour, and it was the application, one of the applications that is under the brand, which is MyFitnessPal. And this one will be like, some people will say, oh, it's not that critical. It's just, an application that people used to run to track the mile or the 2 kilometers that they were able to run in 2 days, and then they forgot about it. But it's not really that simple because the application was used also by people in the military to do training. So by hacking into that application, people were able to identify even secret bases in different countries, because obviously the people from the military will wake up in the morning, they'll go running, they turn on the application, and they will be recording the GPS area and coordinates of the location where they're running. And sometimes it was in the military bases, and it's very critical. And the last one is the Marriott hotels. And this one is very interesting because it just happened a few days ago. While I was working on the presentation, I had to go back and I have to add it because it was in the middle of me preparing the presentation for you guys today. So Marriott had to report that up to 500 million guest information was hacked, including names, physical address, dates of birth, passports numbers, email address, and so on. So as you can see, passwords are very important, and when you get all the other information, it's even more critical. So I pointed a few stats for you here. It's basically the costs are increasing per year. So from 2016 to 2017, there was an increase of 23% of the crime cost for companies. The average cost per loss of record is globally is $141, but in some countries like in the US, you will pay up to $225 per record. So if you are a company and you got compromised, let's say you're a hospital and you got hacked, and you had like, I don't know, 50,000 records, which is your patients. If you multiply 50,000 for 225, that's a lot of money. Yeah, that doesn't include everything. That's just the broad idea of how much it could be. So for the next one, we have a little bit more of details of the Marriott hotels. So they got hacked a few days ago. While I was working on the presentation, I decided to go into the stock market. And as you can see, the value of the organization was pretty stable. From the 120, between 120 and 125. And the day that they reported the incident, the stock market went down in a way that they're probably losing a lot of money, like millions and millions of dollars. So that's just an idea, representation of how an attack can hurt your business. So what techniques do they use? Now that we know what are the motivations, we know that they want to make money, we know that they want to do some espionage. So now, what is that they do? What kind of techniques do they use in order to access your web applications? Now, before getting into details, it's important to know that there is a lot of techniques that they can use. Hacking web application is nothing new. It's very old, by the way. And the thing is that the methods that hackers use are changing constantly. So in a way that it's really hard to keep it under control. So it also depends on what kind of application do you have. So if you have, you know, a web application running in a Windows server, which has like Microsoft SQL Server, that's a different thing that if you're running under Linux and your application is using the PHP programming language. So depending on your infrastructure, the kind of attacks will change. So as you can see in the figure, you have the, let's say, the hackers, the cyber criminals, and they will try different attack vectors depending on your infrastructure. You know, if you have, let's say, like, let's assume that you have a Linux server running MySQL and a PHP application. So they will try to do any kind of vector attack that is related to that infrastructure. Eventually, your application will be secure for some of them. But if you don't have the proper controls, let's assume that they find a SQL injection, which will be a weakness, which is the second column. So when they find the weakness, they will try to get access to the database. And your database is one of the most important assets in your application because it contains all the data, right? So once they get access to your database, they can get into your usernames, your passwords, anything related to your application. If you're a hospital, they will get access to all the patient information, what kind of doctor they're seeing. So it is very critical. Now, that's everything states as a technical impact. But when it moves to business impacts, it's like when we were discussing about Marriott. The business impact is that when they released that the press that they got hacked, the stock market went down. It was sinking, the value. So that's a big impact for their business. Not only that they can get a fine from different organizations. At the beginning of the year, probably you were familiar, you were getting a lot of emails. We updated our policies, we updated our privacy policies, and you know, a lot of organizations were sending that kind of emails. And if you didn't find the reason why, I'm gonna tell to you right now. It was most of them were related to GDPR, which is a regulation, a compliance, a regulation from the European Union, which basically states, as you know, simply put, that you have to protect information of your customers, and your customers are the owner of the information. If you get hacked and you are proved that you didn't follow all the requirements that are necessary to protect the information, then you will get a fine. So if Marriott, they got hacked in 2014. Now is that they realized that they got hacked. So it's not nothing new. I mean, they got hacked in 2014 and they didn't know for years until now. So as an example, if GDPR gets to find that they didn't follow the due diligence, due care process, then they can get a fine for several millions of dollars. So the business impact is very high. Also, you lose the reputation of your company. You know, now customers, they don't want to stay in Marriott because they think that their information is going to be compromised, so they go to a competitor. So yeah. The top techniques that they use are summarized by OWASP Top 10. And OWASP is the Open Web Application Security Project. It's the most important organization when it comes to web security. They have a lot of information, guidelines, best practices. Everything that is related to your application is going to be probably documented by OWASP. Now, I'm not going to get into detail for all the specific controls, but the top risks when it comes to web applications are injection, which one of the example of injection is, as I mentioned before, the SQL injection. We have broken authentication, sensitive data, XML external entities, broken access control, and so on. It goes until the 10 of them. I'm going in the next slides to give you a little bit of background of each of them, so you can have a broad idea of what kind of attacks that they use. But keep in mind that these controls, they're not including just one. Inside those controls, there is multiple vectors of attacks that will change depending on your application. So to move forward, so OWASP explained the first part, which is A1 injection. This one includes everything that is related to injection in your database, in your operating system. So let's say you're running Windows and your ISS server has a vulnerability because you didn't update the server. So they can exploit that and execute code in your web server in order to modify your source code, to access your database, basically do everything they want inside that server. Broken authentication, this one comes down to any flaws that are related to session tokens, to any kind of exploit that can modify your authentication process. Sensitive data exposure is when you're not basically protecting the data of your application. And this one sounds pretty obvious, but it's also one of the most common issues that I find when I go to clients and we do some audits or web application assessments, is that they basically they have a lot of control in place to access your application, to control the users that are inside the application. But then the PDFs, for example, for invoices, are storing the CDN and are accessible by anyone. You don't have to be a user. So that kind of things are very critical, and also the developers, it's very common to have it. So XML, this one is a little bit complicated, but not too long ago, a hacker, an unethical hacker in this case, he was doing some research in the Facebook application, and he realizes that when he was uploading a Word file to the careers, he was trying to fake that he was applying for a job offer. He realizes that when he was uploading the Word document, he was able to execute code on the Facebook server through this specific vulnerability, the XML external entities. So it's basically when you're not controlling the XML processors and you don't evaluate what you are receiving in your server. So broken access control. Let's say that you have an application and you have different control levels. You have the regular user, you have the administrator, you have the, let's say, the manager. So broken access control is just basically when from one authenticated user, you can access to another role that is not your user. So let's say that you're a regular user and you find a way to change the password of the administrator. So then you can access as an administrator. Security misconfiguration, this one comes down to, let's say you have a web server and then you don't configure the errors of your application. And then when your application shows an error, it will show a lot of information that you don't need to share with anyone that is not your team. So and sometimes you go to an application and you put what you're not supposed to put, and then the application will show you a bunch of errors. Like sometimes it will show you, the specific path of the source code. Sometimes it will show you the line. So it will give information. It will give information to hackers that they shouldn't have. Cross-site scripting is basically when you are injecting JavaScript code into your application. That way you can steal session tokens. There is a lot of things that you can do with cross-site scripting. And secure deserialization, it's a little bit of like a remote code execution. Is that if you're not controlling specifically everything that you put into your application, then that kind of issues you can have that kind of issues in your application. Also, using components with vulnerabilities. So in 2018, almost 2019, most of the development teams use a lot of libraries, external libraries, and some of them are secure at the moment of the development of the application, but then in like a year, someone finds a critical vulnerability in that library. Since it's not the specific code of the team, they usually don't see it and they totally miss it. And it doesn't come on, it's not only for libraries, it goes also for services. If you're running a server that is not up to date, or that you install an extension in your web server and eventually that extension has vulnerabilities, so that kind of things. And the last one is insufficient logging and monitoring. So sometimes, and it's very common as well, even for big companies. I have visited clients, and then when they show the infrastructure, they have a lot of control in place, but then they're missing what is called, solutions to monitor the application behaviors. and to log everything that happens in the application. Usually, when you don't have web application firewalls and when you don't have the correct configuration in your web server, it's very weak. Let's say that you get compromised and you don't have enough information to know what happened. So that's the top 10 techniques that they can use within any techniques. They can have several vectors of attack. So it's important to know that there is not only 10, there is a lot more. Those are the most important security risks for web applications. Now, what's the value? Let's say that they were able to compromise your application, they were able to access your database. What is that they do with that information? What is that they sell? How do they do it? How is that they are in a way doing it and the police is not doing anything about it? So as it happens, most of the cyber criminals are using what is called the Tor network. Also, the press and a lot of websites that will call it dark web or deep web. It's basically another internet with which is not regulated by any organization. So there is a lot. It's also uncensored. There is a lot of information that it shouldn't be on the ClearNet, which is our regular internet. It's called ClearNet. It shouldn't be allowed. In Tor, it is completely secure to have that kind of content. Now, the Tor network is not 100% secure. Obviously, probably you have seen in the news, some marketplaces have been taken down by the government, by different governments. Some people have been in jail because they were selling drugs in the deep web. So it's not 100% secure. Now, it's the best that they can do at the moment. It's also super encrypted. So once you go from the ClearNet, you move from a lot of nodes, and at the end, your exit node doesn't have to do anything with you. So probably you are like me sitting here in Miami, and you go between so many nodes that you end up in Turkey, in a server in Turkey. So now we were able to obviously access the dark web. We wanted to do some fresh research of how hackers talk between them. How is the process of selling, and what are the methods that they use? So we went into the dark web, and as we can see, one of the first forums that we were trying to access, because we're trying to look for links and private forums. This screenshot, we are already inside the dark web, the deep web. So most of the forums that were public a few months or years ago now were taken down by different organizations like FBI, Interpol, Europol, and DEA. So they're doing a great job because it's extremely hard to access that kind of servers and to take down and to get in jail the people responsible for those forums. Eventually, we were able to get access into one of the forums that are active. Now, as we, it's extremely hard to get into the forums. It's not only creating an account, like if you go to Facebook. It's not only that. You have to create an account. That's for sure. You have to create kind of a Jabber or of a fake email toward a server. But the most important thing that they want is that you need to be vetted or trusted by other members. So if you're new, like in this case, we were new, so no one knows about us, they won't accept it, the membership, until someone says who you are, what is that you do, until they're sure that you are not the police or anything related to that. So we were just able to get into this screen, which shows, that you basically need 2 vouchers or your account won't be activated. And believe me, it wasn't that easy. We were trying to get people to vouch our account, and it was not possible. So we kept trying. We were able to get into another forum. Now, the registration for this one was open. I don't know when, maybe a few months ago or maybe years, but now it's closed. And the only way to become a member, obviously, as you have guessed, you needed to have an invitation for other members of the forum And also you had to pay a membership fee. So it's amazing. It's kind of an Amazon that you have to pay a membership fee a year, and also you have to get invited by a member of the forum. So it's really hard to get into those forums. So after spending a lot of time, we were able to access one of the least used marketplace forums for cyber criminals. So the other ones appears to be the most important ones. Now, it was not easy to get in. Obviously, we had to skip that part. And then we were able to access this one. We were able to register. We were able to validate our account as we were another cyber criminal. And doing some research within the marketplace, we were able to find that cyber criminals, the first part is that they only get paid through Bitcoin, which is a cryptocurrency, which is extremely hard to trace. A few years ago, maybe you had to pay using Western Union or any kind of bank transfers, but they eventually realized that those things will lead them to the police or to authorities. So they decided to move into Bitcoin, which is extremely hard to detect and to trace. And also the data that they stole, in this case, this person is selling the Dropbox database. Now, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but a few years ago, in 2016, Dropbox had to report that they got hacked, and millions of records were compromised in Dropbox. That was in 2016. Now, we are almost in 2019, and inside the dark place, the marketplace, they're selling the Dropbox information like they were selling, I don't know, like water. It's very common. They were selling the entire database for $10. $10 for a database of millions of users and emails. That's very cheap. Now the database, I believe, was encrypted, which you had to decrypt once you get the database, it takes time and it's really hard. Still, $10 for that kind of information is very cheap, cheaper than we expected, of course. And also, the marketplaces are very organized. To be an illegal activity, usually things are very deorganized. Everyone does whatever they want. But in this case, we realized that it was not deorganized. It was actually very controlled. You can see the first forums that we're trying to access. We try to access require a lot of vetting and trust from other members. Even you had to pay a fee, including the invitations of another members. And also, assuming that you got into the forum, as you can see, it looks like an Amazon or any online store. It's very simple to use. It's very straightforward. They have ratings, they have reviews. So it's like they're selling, I don't know, like they're selling any other product. It's just that they're selling, databases of your application that got compromised. So what's the value? What is like they can do with your application? Let's assume that they were able to compromise your application. We already saw that they can get into the Tor. They can do secure transactions between them. They can exchange information. Let's say that they were able to access a very important website in Italy. Obviously, the person that did it was from Russia. He didn't know anything about Italy or anything related to that. So he went into the marketplace and we were able to sell it to another cyber criminal, which was located in Italy, and he had a better purpose for that database. So it's not only about the information. It's the value of your application is not limited to the information. It's not only the database. It's not the users. It's not the driver license. Although that's the most important asset in your application, it's not the only one. So as we can see here, we have 6 things the top things that they were selling in the marketplace for web applications. The first one, every time they hack a website or any web application, they will set the database, and the database can be anything from from a newspaper to a city to a government agency. The second one is that they use it for malware. So if they see that the database or the information in the application is not that important, then they modify the integrity of the source code to add what is called an exploit kit. So every time a user tries to access your application, if they don't have the proper browser, they don't have updates in the system, they can get compromised. So your application will be serving as a place to hack into other people's computer. The third one is crypto mining. They will install a JavaScript code in the application in a way that every time a user gets into the website, then they will be running the crypto mining for them. So they will be making money for every user that gets into your application. The other one is redirecting traffic. They can sell if your website, let's say that you are a newspaper, you have a lot of traffic, but now you don't let people register or anything like that, so you don't have any critical information, but you have a lot of traffic, and that's good for them because they can resell that. They can redirect that traffic to other exploit kits and hack the people that were trying to access your application or your newspaper in this case. And the other one is web shells, and this one is very common. It's that once they compromise your server, they will put a file, and then that file will allow them to access your server whenever they want. Even if you change your application, the file will be still there, and they can access it, and then they can sell it to other cyber criminals. And then the other cyber criminal can do whatever they want. So basically, a web shell is like an SSH access or like a remote desktop access, but it's only using obviously text and command lines, or even using the same browser that you use. And the last one, it's the credit card scrapping. So if your application happens to be an online store and you are handling payments, so they will modify the code and they will capture every payment that your users are making, and they will later on, use those credit cards for whatever they want. Now, these are the top 6 things that they can do with your application, and the things that they can use to make money in general. There is more, obviously. Maybe in the future we can get more in detail. For now, those are the things more important to know when you have an application. What is that they can do with it? So now that we know the motivations of a hacker, the techniques that they use, how they communicate to each other, what's the value that they find in our applications. So how can we protect ourselves? And this question, I get this question all the time, and it's really hard to give one answer because I believe that it doesn't exist. It really depends. And it depends of, again, what kind of organization you are, even the industry. Also, what kind of infrastructure is your application running? So there is several factors that apply to each scenario. So now there is always, as we mentioned before, they have a lot of policies, of guidelines, best practices in general for almost any case, for almost any scenario. So the first thing that I will do is I will go to OWASP. I will check what is my infrastructure, what kind of, let's say that you are the lead developer for an application that handles, I don't know, social security numbers, and that it's a public application, so anyone can access the application. Like, do you like to check credit reports or anything like that? So I will go into OWASP and I will check, okay, if my application is .NET, then I will follow the best practices in security for .NET. And the second one is, as we mentioned before, the OWASP top 10, is that now that you have the foundation of what are the risks that hackers use the most, then you need to ensure that your application is covered by those risks. Now, don't stop only at those 10. There is more. You should start with the 10 security risks that we mentioned before. But I just wanted to clarify that those are not the only ones. You need to keep going. There is a lot more. Then we have the security scanning. It's very important to formalize a process in which you scan your application in an automated manner and also manually. What I mean by that is like there is a lot of tools that you can use. Some of them are free, are open source, so you don't have to pay anything for it. You configure those tools to run your application, and then they will show you the security issues that they were able to detect. So usually those tools are based on OWASP as well. So it's everything in a way connected, right? So the other one is to formalize the software development lifecycle and formalize the security perspective in the SDLC process. So you need to, instead of, security is not something that you spray on, it's something that you need to bake inside your application. It's not something that you need to wait until you have everything done and then you want to implement security. That's way too late. If you don't have another option, obviously you have to do what you have to do. But if you are in the process of development and you have you need to implement and formalize a software development life cycle in a way that security needs to follow every stage of your application. Every stage, everything that you are implementing in your application on the development phase, you need to secure from that point until obviously production. So you don't need to wait until your application is in production to do the testing, to do the security testing. Now the other one, this one is very simple and it's missing in almost in more organizations that I would like to expect. So implementing a web application firewall. Now most people get confused. A web application firewall is not the same as a regular firewall. Why? Because a web application firewall will basically scan every traffic that goes into your website in and out, and doing that, they're going to be able to recognize patterns that are related to vulnerabilities or exploits. Let's assume that you follow the best practices, you are reviewing your source code, and you think that your application is secure. But as it happens, in the dark market, someone is selling an exploit that will affect you, and you don't know that. So when they try to hack into your application and you have a web application firewall, although the vulnerability exists in your application, the web application firewall will block the request. Why? Because it will detect the pattern that is not very common in your application. You know, if you are supposed to send a social security number and you're sending a bunch of characters that they look like a SQL injection, the web application firewall will block it, will let you know, and probably you can ban that IP so they don't access your application again. And the last one is using an independent security assessment company or third party. Why? Because sometimes it is the same for auditing. So you have every process in place. Now you have to make sure to have an external view of how your application looks like. Because when you are internal, everything looks very straightforward. But when someone comes from an external company, they have different point of views. So they get more in deep in the things that you were missing for years or months, and they will give you recommendations. Now, obviously, that's not something that you need to do every month. That's just depending on your organization, and, you know, how often, how regular is your software development life cycle. So those are the top recommendations. Now, the first one, it's more going back a little bit. The first one, which is OWASP, it's just research that you have to do related to your specific industry, your specific infrastructure. So get familiar with the Open Web Application Security Project. There is the Web Application Security Project. It's made by security professionals, the lead professionals around the world, and the lead organizations that are related to web application security. So they are very up to date. So it's important to know that. So that's everything that we were able to cover today. Obviously, it's high level. We are not able to get into much detail. However, if you have any questions, thoughts, fears, or doubts of everything that I was talking about, please let me know. We can get more specific in the questions. Everything that is related to your industry or to your infrastructure. If you think that there is something that I was missing that will help you if I tell you, just let me know. And thank you all for coming today again.